All right, welcome back to the waiting room with Dr. SEC. At this time, we're going to be joined by my number one Alabama insider, Stephen M. Smith from Touchdown Alabama Magazine. Welcome to the show, Stephen.
I appreciate being on today, man. And hey, don't patronize just yet. Don't do it just yet.
Well, we're glad to have you back on the show, man. And I was thinking right before you came on, it's been almost a decade ago since we first had you on the show. And you were a guy that was wet behind the ears, still in college, and you really have become one of the premier sources for Alabama football and really Alabama sports in general.
It's been a journey, man. It's been a grind, but definitely appreciating and very thankful for the opportunity that I have myself in.
Absolutely. Now, before we talk about the product that we're going to see on the field for this Alabama Crimson football team coming up in the 2020 season, I want to talk just a moment about some of the adjustments that have happened off the field. And of course, that is the announcement and news that Scott Cochran was leaving the strength and conditioning program, a guy that has been there since the beginning of the Saban era there, really has been with Saban throughout, a guy that, and really the most known strength and conditioning program guy in the country. I mean, where else do you have a strength and conditioning coach where he has his own commercials, he has his own T-shirts? I mean, Scott Cochran really had become a staple, if you will, of that program and a face, one of the faces of that program. And he's left for the University of Georgia, and he's going to be a special teams coordinator there on the field position. But Alabama brought in a couple of guys I know that you're excited about, a dynamic duo, if you will, from Indiana that are really versed in sports science as well as strength and conditioning. And it seems that you've been really excited about these guys. Tell me what has been your overall impression of the changeover thus far.
I think it was a huge change in the positive direction, and Scott Cochran will be missed. Don't get me wrong. Like you mentioned, he was the booming voice. He was somebody that was very unique in what he did. A lot of the older players have sort of a vibe to him because he kind of built this thing with the Julio Joneses, the Marcel Dariuses, the Mark Ingrams, Mark Barons of the world. So, those guys will greatly miss him. Of course, the current players will miss him, but a change needed to be made, and Coach Saban could kind of sense this for quite some time, especially 2016, where the injury started happening to Alabama, but most notably 2017 and 2018. When I talked to a lot of people and just different guys involved with the program, they tell me that 2018, that was the year where the big change happened, to where you didn't quite see Scott Cochran pushing these guys the way he is normally used to. You didn't quite see, Scott Cochran making sure that these guys were having a healthy weight. A lot of guys came in with bad weight on them, and they were not healthy, and that really contributed to, the injuries that took place on the field and off the field due to these guys were not carrying the proper weight. And a lot of what Scott Cochran did in terms of his program were kind of outdated, kind of archaic things that were not in the modern day time of strength and conditioning. So you bring in Dr. Matt Rea and David Ballou from Indiana. Both of those two also work together at IMG Academy. Ballou, the strength and conditioning guy, and Dr. Matt Rea, the head of sports science. And they're very high tech. They are on the cutting edge of the sports science market in that department. And this is exactly what Nick Saban wanted to do, is to stay on top of the game, look at the analytics, study the analytics, and really get the utmost in speed, utmost in power, utmost in maximum production from the players. So he's going to this route, especially with the new sports science building being brought into the University of Alabama. And according to the guys I've gotten the chance to speak with, the players are loving it. It's whipping their tail. It's getting their butt into shape. It's different exercises. It's different stations, but they're targeting every part of the body, from the upper body to the lower limbs to the core to the speed. Like, these two guys are really infusing things inside this program that the head athletic trainer, Jeff Allen, is very excited about. and the players are very excited about.
You know, it's interesting because Alabama has been so good for so long that anytime anything dramatic happens inside the program or a big positional change or something of that nature, it seems like people want to believe it's going to be the end of the world. And it's understandable to question, especially in the beginning, how impactful this was going to be because we know how valuable Scott Cochran has been to the Alabama football program. But with that said, the more you look at it, it almost seems like a win win situation for both parties because I think Georgia needed a guy like Scott Cochran on the field. They've had a lot of problems finishing games, a lot of problem, finishing the drill, if you will, putting teams away, putting their foot on their neck and closing out the deal. And Scott Cochran brings that mentality they need on the field to hear that voice. I think he's going to help them immensely, but at the same time, I'm not sure it wasn't time for a change in the strength and conditioning program simply because the game has changed so much. With the addition of it's almost to the point that everybody at some point seems like they're eligible for a pass, right? This is a much quicker, faster, pass happy game than it's been in the past. And because of that, especially at the linebacker position, these guys got to be more quick and fit than they are big and strong. It seems like that's the way that college football is going. Has that kind of been what you've seen, that it's really a kind of a win-win for both teams?
Especially in the speed aspect. You saw the last 2 years, Alabama hasn't had the speed that it needs to have on defense, primarily at the linebacker position and
Right.
also on the defensive line. Guys not being quick enough with that first step to either attack the quarterback or attack whomever has the football, take away the angle of guys to create situations to get to the outside. And Nick Saban has noticed that. And I go back to guys coming into fall camp or coming into summer workouts with that bad weight on them, not dropping that weight. And from dropping that weight, having that enhancement of speed and converting that speed to power. So having bad weight, not having the speed it needs to have. So, both of those aspects really translated into not just the injuries, but Alabama not being as quick as it needs to be defensively on the field in the last 2 seasons.
Absolutely. It's going to be interesting for both teams to see how this change is going to impact them long term. Now, I want to look at Alabama on the field because they are looking to bounce back from missing the playoffs for the first time in the college football playoff era. I mean, that is just unbelievable to think about. They are losing a ton of firepower on offense, but the good thing about being Alabama is they have a ton returning as well. But probably the biggest question mark for the casual fan has been about the quarterback position. Now, I want to get your opinion on this because I've got to start by saying that I love Bryce Young. When I look at all the quarterbacks from this class, I only look at one of them and say, that guy is definitely a game changer. And unless there's some type of injury or other issue, he's the one guy that you can look at and say, yeah, he's going to be a star. Like, unquestionably, I think Bryce Young is going to be a star. At the same time, I don't know if there's a more, I don't want to say disrespected, maybe neglected, or probably overlooked is the right word, player than Mac Jones right now. You're talking about a guy that looked really good against Auburn on the road, looked really good against Michigan on the road. And so, my question for you is this: with this quarterback situation looming, what are you expecting to see and what are you looking for come springtime?
I think this is Mac Jones' team, and people forget that just like Tua Tagovailoa, just like Jalen Hurts, just like Bryce Young, all of those three guys were at the Elite 11 with Trent Dilfer. Mac Jones was there too. People fail to realize
Right.
that Mac Jones was a four-star young man coming out of high school in Jacksonville, Florida. People forget that this is the same Mac Jones that led his team, the Bowl School, to a Class 4A state championship in 2016. I mean, people forget Mac Jones could have went anywhere in college football. At one point, was committed to Kentucky, and Mark Stoops in that program would have embraced him with open arms. But Here's a guy that loves to compete, that loves to battle, that did not want the easy way out. He comes to Alabama in the same recruiting class as one Tua Tagovailoa. He comes to Alabama in a situation where it already had a starter in Jalen Hurts. He came in, he put his nose to the grindstone. He worked incredibly hard, not just on the field and in practice, but also with his physical body. When you talk to players on the team about him, and if someone knew, if people were to know about how special this young man is, it would be the players on the team, because they play on this team. They know the ins and outs on this team. So if anybody were to know how special, how much of a leader, of a bona fide player that Mac Jones is, it would be his teammates inside that locker room. And when you talk to them, every last one of those guys, from Jalen Waddle to Devontae Smith to guys in the offensive line to the running backs, even players on defense, they say, this is the man for the people. This is Mac Jones. This is somebody that if I were to go to war with somebody, I'm going to war, with Mac Jones. There was a funny story that I got a chance to hear from one Jared Maiden, former Alabama defensive back who's now pursuing the NFL. He talked about how, Mac Jones back in 2017, his freshman year, when he was running scout team on offense, he would throw deep ball passes to Tyrell Shavers, who was his favorite receiver at the time. And he kept throwing the deep ball so much that it kind of got on Nick Saban's nerves. And Nick Saban looks at Mac Jones and goes, son, stop throwing the ball deep all the time. No one goes toe-to-toe with Nick Saban. I have seen 300-pound men cry at the feet of this man because they know Nick Saban has their NFL career in the palm of his hand. You don't see too many guys argue with Nick Saban. Mac Jones gets up, lasers the 68-year-old man in his face and says, Coach, if you want me to stop it, tell your defense to come at me. Tell them to check me. Tell them to stop me. And from that moment, to see a young man with that type of charisma to check his own coach, that's somebody I'm getting behind right there. And you mentioned what he did against Auburn in the Iron Bowl. People always bring up the 2 pick sixes, but he got up, threw for 4 touchdowns, gave Alabama every shot to win that football game, played very well against Michigan in the Citrus Bowl. I think people feel at this day and age, people want more than just to win. They want to be entertained while they win. So I guess that's the reason why Bryce Young has drawn so much attention. And Bryce Young's going to be a star, and he's going to be outstanding during his time here. But right now, when I look at a guy like Mac Jones, he has earned his opportunity. He has waited his time. And with the talent around him, to me, if Mac Jones does not just collapse, he's the starting quarterback.
Yeah, I've got to agree. And again, I've been so impressed with him. A lot of people go back to that Auburn game and say, well, the 2 pick sixes, right? But the reality is the first one was a bad pass. But we see all quarterbacks make bad passes. I mean, think about the pass that Tua had before the half against LSU. I mean, that was just a bad pass. But the truth is, if you look at the rest of the game, the second one was a fluke, the second interception. And then you look at the rest of the game, he was very accurate. He sliced and diced this very good Auburn defense that teams had struggled with all season. He has the success against Auburn, goes in against Michigan, who's supposed to have this all-world defense, slice and dice them. I mean, I can't imagine how he could ask for better performance than he had when you consider the fact that he wasn't the starter going into the season, that he only became the starter very late in the season due to injury. I mean, he played exceptionally well, and I don't want to take anything from Bryce Young because, again, I think he is a star in the making. I think the difference is that a redshirt junior in Mac Jones is better for Alabama at this point than a true freshman Bryce Young. And again, we're not talking about the end of their careers. We're talking about a guy that's been in the program for 3 years compared to a guy that's been in a program for 3 months.
Oh, absolutely. And like I mentioned, this is a guy that, going back to what you said about Michigan, you're facing Josh Uche, one of the best pass rushers in this draft class. Yeah. Mac Jones took some shots against that Michigan defense, got up, completed 16 for 25, 327 yards. He had 3 touchdowns, including an 85-yard rainbow to Jerry Jeudy. So
Right.
the young man can play the position of quarterback. You have all the talent around him, and it's just, like I said, it's crazy at times how people forget the hard work he has put in to this program. But if he just does not completely collapse to the ground, which I do not see happening, Mac Jones is more than capable of leading this program to a national championship. And in my opinion, he's got Alabama in a situation at quarterback where Bama is much better off at that position than a lot of teams in college football who are scrambling to figure out who's our guy.
You touched on something I'd like for you to elaborate on just a little bit, and that is there any concern that if Mac Jones wins this competition by too much, that Alabama could find themselves in the same situation that Georgia has found themselves in? You remember that they got the number one quarterback in the country, Jacob Eason, and he had a good freshman year, but then turned his ankle. Jake Fromm, another high prospect, comes in. Well, then they get Justin Fields in the next recruiting class. So Jacob Eason kind of sees the writing on the wall. He transfers. Jake Fromm, plays good enough that they don't give Justin Field the nod. Justin Fields ends up transferring. Jake Fromm leaves early for the draft, and now Georgia is relying upon a transfer quarterback to kind of keep this program in the national championship hunt.
So here's the thing, and the only way I can see that happen is if Mac Jones wins the competition, but goes into the season and really sort of starts to struggle. But even in the struggle, Nick Saban still sticks with him.
Yeah,
That's probably the only reason where I can see that happening. And I go back to once again 2016, where Nick Saban gives the starting nod to Blake Barnett, redshirt freshman against USC. People are excited to see, okay, what could he do? Could not quite move the football, and you throw in a Jalen Hurts, and the story becomes history. And then 2017, where you trust Jalen Hurts, you really trust him, but he was never taught how to be a conceptual quarterback. And then once the athleticism tops out and he struggles against Georgia, then you have to go up to a Tonga Valoa in the championship game. In this situation, I feel like the only way that would happen would be if Mac Jones wins the job outright. He struggles tremendously, but Nick Saban's mindset of sometimes being too loyal to a fault, and that bites him in the backside, that would probably be the only issue there.
Absolutely. We're talking to Stephen M. Smith, Touchdown Alabama Magazine. Stephen, you hit the nail on the head right there, because that's what happened at Georgia with Justin Fields. Jake Fromm was as bad as you could possibly be against LSU, and he didn't give Justin Fields even a sniff at the chance or the opportunity. And I think that was when Justin Fields made up his mind. So you bring up a great point there. Now, whoever the quarterback is going to be, and I believe it's going to be Mac Jones, but whoever the quarterback is going to be, one of the greatest tools for the passing game is a great running game. And somehow, some way, I don't know how they did it, Stephen M. Smith, you got to tell me, but they convinced Najee Harris, which is unheard of to have a running back of his caliber to come back, because you can only take so many hits as a running back and such. Listen, I expect this guy to have a big, big year. Do you expect Najee to see more touches this season than he has in the past few?
I absolutely do. And the crazy story about Najee was Najee felt like, especially from the LSU game to the end of the season, he felt like he had really done enough to declare for the draft.
Yeah.
And I remember I was told that Najee spoke with the coaching staff multiple times after the end of the season. And when he got his draft grade back, he and his mom both were with Nick Saban and the coaching staff. Najee got a third to fourth round grade, and it crushed him. It crushed him. It crushed his mom. His mom was very upset. Najee was very upset. And prior to going back home to California to be with his family for a few days or so, the coaching staff had numerous meetings with Najee, convincing him, hey, if you come back We are going to give you every single opportunity to touch the football. You're going to get your carries. You're going to get more than your ample amount of touches. Basically saying, if you come back, Najee, we're going to give you a shot to possibly win the Heisman Trophy and put you in a situation where you can be, a first-round running back. And they sold him this on Mac Jones being the quarterback. So that really bought Najee all the way in. So he is back in the fold here, and this is a guy that if he shows that he's got that added power to his game, we know he can spin move. We know he can hurdle. We know he can stiff arm. We know he's got the speed. We know he can catch the ball out of the backfield. 27 catches last year, 304 receiving yards, 7 touchdowns, just ridiculous numbers. If he can show that he has added the power element to his game where he can drag guys for 3 and 4 and 5 yards down the field, because he is going to have the offensive line to get it done this year. Alabama's going to have a dynamic offensive line, even with losing the likes of Jedrick Wills to the NFL draft and Matt Womack is gone. Bama's going to have the offensive line regardless. So for Najee, if he can show to the players, to the coaching staff, and the fans that he has added a power element to his game, this young man is going to be off the charts.
Oh, absolutely. And I've got to tell you, if there are 32 NFL teams that would wait to the third or fourth round on this guy, I mean, I think some of these teams need to examine who they're hiring to make their selections, because this guy, he's a PTPer, man, always has been. What I love about Najee is Najee always shows up at the biggest moments, right? Like, this guy always embraces the moment, and when you need a play, he's the guy that can make it. Now, on the defensive side of the football, the Crimson Tide got to show some improvement. Now, let me start at the defense coordinator position. And I want to ask you this. Do you think that Pete Golding received too much criticism last year when you consider the injuries and the amount of youth that they had to play at Alabama last season?
It's a catch-22 with Pete, because to me, I think it was a bit too much criticism, just in the sense of Pete Golding went in the last year, his first year as the primary play caller. This is his third year in the system now, but year one in 2018, he was the co-DC, but the primary play caller was Taj Lupoi. So last season, Pete Golding was the primary play caller, and he went in the last year thinking, I'm going to have Dylan Moses, captain of my defense, my ace at inside linebacker, my middle guy. He went in the last year thinking, I'm going to have Dylan Moses. I'm going to have Joshua McMillan. I'm going to have LeBron Ray. He went in thinking my marquee defensive guys, they're going to be impacted. They're going to be intact. And everybody was excited for the 2019 defense. Well, you go into August camp, boom, Dylan Moses gets hurt. So now it's like, okay, the leader of my defense is out for the season before the season even starts. And then a week later, in a scrimmage game, boom, Joshua McMillan goes down. So now both of your inside linebackers in a critical position in terms of not just production, but also communication, both of those guys are out. And then on top of that, 3 games into the season, LeBron Ray goes down with a foot. So there goes one of your main defensive line guys. So you are turning to 2 true freshmen in Shane Lee and Christian Harris, who quite naturally they're thinking, well, I get a chance to wait, learn the system, wait my time, learn from these guys. Well, now it becomes, welcome to the world, young bucks. You guys, you're it.
Right.
So
right.
the pressure on both of those guys, to where you're looking for confirmation and affirmation to, am I calling the right play? Am I putting this in the right situation? Is it tango? Is it Ringo? Is it man? Is it zone? What am I supposed to do? And the guy you're looking for that affirmation from is just as young as you are. Now, Pete Golding has to call the most simplest of defenses, because he's trying to make sure he's not putting too much on the young freshman. And what that does is, now you've got Xavier McKinney from his free safety spot. He's got to make all the communication. He's got to put guys in the right spot. And on top of that, he's got to be able to jump back into his play and make the tackles and make the necessary plays, which I'm happy that X was able to have a great stat sheet. But when your defensive back is having to be the one to do everything,
Right.
that's not always the best case scenario, and that falls back on the injuries and Pete Golding having the double dip, and that was kind of the reason why the communication was off, while Alabama's defense was off, because of you're having to play two young guys, two freshmen in the middle of your defense, and not only does Pete have to coach, he has to have that patience with these freshmen, but when you're dealing with Alabama fans that all they have known is dominant defense, dominant defense, dominant defense, and you see a defense that not necessarily bad because it still finished in the top 20
Right.
for scoring defense and total defense, but because it wasn't in the top 5 or in the top 10, the fans have an issue.
Absolutely. And again, you make such a great point, and I think about so many times, if an offensive coordinator comes in, a new offensive coordinator, the best thing for a new offensive coordinator is to have an experienced quarterback who knows how to make good checks at the line, right? And the thing about that is, on the defensive side of the football, you bring in Golding, who's calling plays for him for the first time. Well, his quarterback on the field, Dylan Moses, went down, and I don't think that can be expressed enough, the impact that had to have your signal caller, the guy that knows how to get everybody in the right spot at the right time. When you have a new voice calling plays on the sidelines, you need Dylan Moses in the middle calling those plays.
You really do, and he was ready for this season, for this past season. Pete Golding had this defense set up, and with him in mind, and especially with Dylan coming off the 2018 year where he had 86 tackles. So everything was set up in line for Dylan Moses to be the guy. So when he went down, here comes a Shane Lee that he's good. He's very conscious, but he was not Dylan. And
Right.
he had to learn things on the fly. He had to comprehend things on the fly. So it was tough for a young man to have to learn, day by day, especially in a complex Nick Saban defense. I mean, you have guys that catch on to it like breakfast cereal. Those guys are just special. Rolando McClain was just special. Dylan Moses is special.
Right.
Minka Fitzpatrick, my goodness, was just special. So
Right.
you're not going to have too many of those special guys walk around every single day. So it was trial by fire for Shane Lee, and it was trial by fire for Christian Harris, definitely trial by fire for Pete Golding.
Now, I want to move on to this schedule coming up. And again, I appreciate you taking so much time and being with us. And this schedule this year, you never know how it's going to play out to some of these teams. We see how good they are. But this schedule for Alabama has potential to be a very difficult one. They open up with USC, which is, listen, I know they're not the USC of old, but it's always a dangerous team. They got to play UGA and, of course, as always, Tennessee, but an improving Tennessee from the East. They got to play at LSU. What are the biggest keys for you for this Crimson Tide team to be able to navigate through this schedule that's a little bit tricky and a little bit more difficult than it's been the past few years and make it back to the college football playoffs?
Well, first things first is they got to get through spring, summer, and fall camp with no injuries, no
Right.
season-ending injuries. I mean, I get it. You're going to have a nick and a bruise there. It's just, that's football, but no season-ending injuries. That's key number one. Number two, in the secondary, these guys in the secondary, they got to trust their technique. In the last 2 years, we've seen guys in the secondary that would be in the right phase in the hip pocket of receivers, but they would panic. They would not trust the technique taught by Nick Saban. So Patrick Surtain, Josh Jobe, DeMarco Helms, Jordan Battle, Daniel Wright, whomever your 5 to 6 guys in the secondary wind up being, they have got to trust that technique on the back end. So that's a huge thing right there. In terms of the outside linebacker position, Alabama's got to find that guy that can consistently affect the quarterback, who can consistently affect the passing game, whether it's Chris Allen, whether it's King Wakuda, Jerez Parks, Kevin Harris II. Will this finally be the year that Ben Davis mentally puts it all together? You look at some of these freshmen in here right now with Will Anderson, Drew Sanders, Chris Bradwell. Could one of these 3 guys be the guy to get it done in terms of outside linebacker? And just on the offensive line, Mac Jones on offense, Mac Jones playing within himself, being that guy to get the guys involved on the field, putting passes in the right area on the right spot, and having this offense in sync. So if Alabama does not have the crazy season-ending injuries, if the secondary defensively can fall in the line, if they can get that guy to affect the quarterback from the outside linebacker perspective, and just have balance both offensively and defensively, I think they can navigate the schedule. But week 3 of the season against Georgia, that will tell the tape.
Once again, we're talking to Stephen M. Smith from Touchdown Alabama Magazine. Stephen, we appreciate you taking some time and being with us, and we want you to allow our listeners to know where they can find you at on social media, but also Touchdown Alabama Magazine. And I've got to tell you, Stephen, years ago, this magazine was very good because it had a lot of fan pieces, a lot of things that were just stories that were intriguing, captivating stories, letting you know more about the players and the coaches and things of that nature. But over the last couple of years, this magazine really has transformed to more than just fan pieces, and it really has become the go to source for everything Alabama sports, whether you're talking about recruiting, whether you're talking about the players, the football program, whether you're talking about players in the NFL, scouting reports, whatever it is. You guys are doing as good, if not better, than anybody in the country at covering Alabama sports. So I want you to allow our listeners and watchers and viewers to know where they can find more about you and about Touchdown Alabama Magazine.
Well, they can definitely find me on Twitter at Coaching M. Smith. I do some volunteer coaching for a couple of the high schools here at Coaching M. Smith on Twitter. That would be my handle. The magazine's handle is at TD Alabama Mag on Twitter, at TD Alabama Mag. The site, touchdownalabama.com, touchdownalabama.com. That is the site where we are constantly putting out content on the Crimson Tide. I actually have a podcast show called In My Own Words. They can find that on Twitter at In My Own Words TDA. That's at In My Own Words TDA. We run the podcast 3 days a week, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays in Tuscaloosa. That's Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We put out snippets. We put out different show topics from the podcast, and it airs those 3 nights at 6 p.m. But that's Touchdown Alabama Magazine.
All right, once again, Stephen M. Smith, Touchdown Alabama Magazine. Stephen, once again, appreciate having you on the show and look forward to having you on again real soon.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Thanks, man. I appreciate it.